My name is Owen, and I'm a fourth-year behavioral neuroscience student at UBC. Today, I will be giving a talk on the neuroscience of consciousness and free will. So first off, we have to answer the question, what is free will? The definition of free will is the power or capacity to choose among alternatives or to act in certain situations independently of natural, social, or divine restraints. This comes with the assumption that we are responsible for our own decisions, both good and bad, and it is at the basis of our current social pillars. For example, our legal system presumes freedom, and we have economic theories that are based upon freedom. Philosophers, however, have been making the claim that free will is an illusion for hundreds of years. In philosophy, there is a lot of disagreement as to the right view of free will. Most philosophers believe that a person has free will if they can act freely, and that this kind of control is linked to whether it would be appropriate to hold that person responsible for what they do. For example, we don't typically hold people responsible for what they do if they're acting under severe threat or inner compulsion. The notion of a free will is a notion that we have inherited from antiquity, although it is worth mentioning that there is no reference to free will in Greek philosophy, even though Plato and Aristotle had plenty of reason to mention it. Free will was originally introduced within a late Stoic theory, then rivaled by Platonist and peripatetic views. Early Christians then went on to adopt the Stoic theories of free will as well. These thoughts have been taken up in every period of Western philosophy by some of the most important philosophical figures, such as Augustine, Aquinas, and Kant. The topic of free will also gives rise to purely empirical questions that are being explored in the human sciences. Do we have it, and to what degree do we have free will? Now, turning to neuroscience, first research emerged in the 1960s from work by Kornhuber and Deek, showing that there is a slow buildup of negative brain activity in the supplementary motor area and pre-supplementary motor area measurable by electroencephalography. This is measured just prior to voluntary bodily movement, which is movement initiated by the participant. The pair coined this the readiness potential, and though these two gentlemen did not mean to start a debate over free will, they evidently did. Their research was followed up in 1983 by a famous study by Benjamin Lebet. In this experiment, Lebet used electroencephalography again, which basically records brainwaves referred to as event-related potentials to track a series of sequences in the cerebrum. This revealed that the readiness potential occurs anywhere between 500 and 1,000 milliseconds before you actually affirmatively decide to act on something. In this case, it was to move a limb. Many took that as a challenge to the existence of free will, but subsequent studies argue that that was a flawed interpretation and that the results say little overall. Errors pointed out are mainly around human error and response rates. For example, in 2010, Dr. Aaron Schurter and his colleagues proposed that Lebet's findings did nothing to prove free will as an illusion. Rather, they showed that the human brain, when faced with an arbitrary task, sometimes simply tips the scales towards one decision over another, saving us from uselessly pondering between decisions of no real consequence. Most recently, Yuri Maus, a computational neuroscientist at Chapman University, further expanded on Lebet's work. He found that event-related potentials are only present before arbitrary decision-making and not deliberate decisions. In an interview, he said, even if you could really predict these very arbitrary decisions of which hand you raise, it doesn't seem to generalize to important life decisions. The general consensus in the field is that neuroscience needs philosopher colleagues, since they have been thinking about free will for many more years than neuroscientists have. So what remains unanswered? Whether we have free will is not the question being asked anymore, since even though we can act on our desires and wishes, we do not necessarily have control over the rest of the world. Malin said that there isn't compelling evidence that there isn't free will, but that research has to go beyond Lebet-type experiments. The questions that now have to be asked are, how does the brain enable conscious causal control of our actions and decisions? How do our conscious intentions lead to actions? And what leads to purposeful, deliberate actions? There is now an international conference on the neuroscience of free will where philosophers and neuroscientists come together to work on tackling this mystery. Here, each project has at least 2 neuroscientists and at least 1 philosopher involved, something that is written in their contract. Dr. Maus leads this group of neuroscientists and philosophers to advance our understanding of free will. In a Science magazine article by Bahar Ghalipur, she nicely summarizes that 4 decades later, neuroscientists have reached the same conclusion as philosophers. Free will is complicated. It requires folks to come together in an interdisciplinary manner to put their minds together and solve the unsolvable. Thank you.